Are you a beginner VFX artist that sometimes looks at your work and thinks, there's something not quite right about this, but I'm not entirely sure what it is? Well, look no further, because in this video I'm going to go over 5 mistakes that I see beginner VFX artists making all the time. Tip number 1 is to do with rotoscoping. Yep, we all hate it. I'm about to show you something that's going to cut all of your roto time in half, if not more. So most of the time when amateurs are doing roto, they'll just make a shape and then go frame by frame and move the points. Something most people don't realise is you can spend a couple of minutes to do a quick track before you start rotoscoping and then just draw the shape once. Then for the most part the track will do the work for you, moving the roto where it needs to go, and then you just have to adjust it every once in a while for perspective changes like this. The shot is 50 frames long and I only had to adjust the shape on 8 frames. So if you were doing this shot, I would have just saved you 84% of the roto that you would have done. You're welcome. Tip number 2 is you don't always have to go straight to roto. Sometimes you can just do a key or two to give you most if not all of the outline you're looking for. For example here, to isolate the buildings, I just quickly keyed the blue in the sky. On top of this I would just do a couple of roto shapes to clean up some of the messy bits of the key, but again, way faster than doing the whole lot with roto. Tip number 3 is for matte paintings. I see this all the time in student show reels and I'm guilty of it myself in the past as well. If you're going to take something from one image and put it into another, you need to make sure that the colours match. This means more than just making it slightly more red, green or blue. You have to look at what colour the shadows are, what colour the highlights are. There's factors like the further away from the camera something is, generally it will be less saturated because of the atmosphere in the air. And all of these factors contribute to making something feel like it sits into an image. It all sounds like fairly simple stuff, but I see people making this mistake all the time. This is me quickly switching to the before and after. You can see how much of a difference it makes. Here's a quick bonus tip. If you're taking a photo and putting it into a video, the video is going to have grain on it. So it's really important to add some grain onto the photo as well so that it matches, otherwise you end up with this. Tip number 4 is adding motion blur to your work, and this can apply to either CGI renders or just moving something in 2D. This is a quick example I made. The helicopter is completely the wrong scale, but ignore that. This first render is with motion blur, which I hope you would agree looks fairly correct. And then I did a second render without motion blur so you can see what it looks like. If we zoom in a little bit so you can look at it a bit closer, you can see how much difference the motion blur makes. Motion blur adds a real sense of movement, and if you take it away, it makes the footage feel like it's stuttering. Alternatively, if you're just working in 2D, then just make sure you have motion blur enabled in your comp. This will make sure anything that moves has some convincing motion blur added to it automatically. And the final tip of this video is to match the softness across your entire shot. Again, using the helicopter as an example, I rendered one where I matched the softness of the background onto the CGI and one without. CGI in particular comes out the renderer absolutely razor sharp, and even with a very expensive lens, your footage usually isn't going to be quite as sharp. So it's really important if you're putting some CGI into your shot to make it a little bit softer so that it sits into the background. This also applies to 2D images, for example the skyscraper I put into the shot earlier. And that's my list of 5 mistakes that I see amateur VFX artists making all the time. If you enjoyed this video, consider liking and subscribing, and I'll see you next time.